The earth mounded, and part of the plastic bag was showing. They would see it the next morning. That was good. He inhaled the sharp odor of an upended clump of grass, its roots thin white threads, like worms. The man retraced his steps. He climbed over the wall, then the gate. He got in the car. He took a deep breath, dried off the sweat, then started the car up quickly. He accelerated. The street was deserted, and not a lamp was lighted. In the rearview mirror he saw the iridescent man-made halo of Giuriati Field fading. Again he pressed the accelerator, and the car entered the labyrinth of the dark body of Milan. Ishmael had begun his work. This was the first sign. The body of the child had been put in place. Milan, March 23, 2001, 0340. The old man was smoking a gitane. Entranced, he was observing the grain of the cigarette paper. The American was watching him from behind the window, but the old man couldn't see him. The cigarette didn't have the same yellowish paper anymore, the papier de maïs that he had been used to. And now there was a filter, too. The smoke rose in fluid blue spirals, astonishingly clear, and as he watched it, the old man was still more entranced. Sometimes it looked like chalk, that kind of discrete and complicated flow, or some equation taking shape, or spirit, pure spirit, the old man thought. Then he roused himself. It was cold. The building he was watching was dark. The fluorescent light over the entrance was broken. It flickered, and at intervals went out. To the old man it seemed that he could hear the clicking of the circuit that ignited the gas. It seemed to him that he was right there, under the defective fluorescent light, at the door, its dull gilded aluminum faded by the years, the rough stone stair worn by footsteps. He could even see into the carpet, which had once been red and now was darkened and smooth, threadbare in the middle. Farther on, perhaps near the elevator, was an ornamental plant. Maybe it wasn't true about the plant. Or it might be one of those plastic ones that sit motionless, gathering dust. By nightfall he had seen a lot of people going in and out of that doorway. He had not seen the American, however. Everything hinged on knowing for certain whether the American was already in there when the old man arrived. He just had to be patient, hunching a little in his overcoat, breaking the wetness with gitanes. The American would have to go out sooner or later. It was another story, though, if the American was not in the apartment. Nor was there any guarantee that he would return to this place. The information was new and reliable, but the American moved quickly. He was always alert. A week before, when he had arrived in Italy, they had tried to capture him in the restrooms at the Malpensa airport. 2 of them had gone in, the way they usually did, and they had done it well. He, the old man, hadn't been there. He had restricted himself to coordinating the operation. His men had waited until no one was in the men's room except the American, and then had gone in. They checked under the doors of every stall. Nothing. They waited. Maybe he had lifted up his feet. But they had made an enormous blunder. One of them should have stayed in the men's room while the other went to look in the ladies' room. They hadn't, in fact, been certain that at the moment he turned the corner, the American had actually gone to the men's room. They had been unable to check. They didn't want to be noticed or arouse the man's suspicions. Then they realized their error. Meanwhile, the American had vanished, slipping out through the ladies' room. After they lost the American, the old man had decided to participate personally in the operations. They had given him the photograph taken as a precautionary measure when the American rounded the corner toward the restrooms of the Malpensa airport. Son of a bitch. The typical American face, the face of someone who chews gum. The typical gaze, the gaze of all Americans. Empty, cow-like, with 2 satisfied eyes, expressing nothing but a vague sense of possessing an advantage over everyone else. Reddish-blonde hair fell untidily over the hairless neck. The American was wearing a loose green rain jacket. He carried a black briefcase of a synthetic material. It was impossible to tell if he realized that they had taken his picture. They hadn't killed him, but at least they had photographed him, which was like murdering him by half. He must be in Milan, that much was obvious. He had at least 2 operations to carry out. The information on these was quite confusing. It was enough to know that he had to do with Ishmael. He was under Ishmael's orders, this was certain. He had to be found and eliminated. The Americans would send someone else, because meanwhile, as far as they knew, the main event, the reason that the American had come to Milan, was approaching. Ishmael intended to strike, in Milan and immediately. The sources had been unable to get any information, not a single bit on what the American was doing, because no one knew where he was. Once he was found, there were two choices: to kill him right away, wait for someone else to arrive and get rid of him too, and so on, until the date fixed by Ishmael had passed, or to follow the American, see what he did, gain a clearer sense of the operation, and only then kill him. The old man had worked practically without stopping to try to discover any sign of the American's presence. He had mobilized his personal sources, unofficial and less efficient than those of the service, but scattered randomly everywhere, a net so wide that some fish might be caught in it. He had allowed himself in 6 days exactly 22 hours of sleep. "After a while you get used to it," the old man had said to the boy the service had sent to keep an eye on him. "It's like being a stone. You think a stone isn't conscious? To you it seems lifeless, or maybe inanimate, but that's not true. Even a stone has feelings, and it feels more than we do, more acutely. It's attentive because it doesn't move. It's inevitable that just when you least expect it, you're going to stumble on that stone." The kid got on his nerves. He knew a lot just because he was present. He was supposed to watch both the American and the old man himself. It was always this way when Ishmael was involved. Why didn't the service, for once, trust him? If he had been a mercenary... The old man smiled. A mercenary at his age. He had worked for the service for years. Why not trust him? The boy was inexperienced, too young. It didn't matter now. He was dead. It was the boy who had found the American. He had taken the phone call while the old man was allowing himself a couple of hours of sleep. The man at the American library had said simply, "He's here." The old man was well aware that agents from the USA often used the American library as a place for sorting messages. The boy hadn't thought twice. He hadn't woken the old man, but had left a note and gone himself to tail the American. Fucking son of a bitch, who knew what that kid wanted to accomplish? Be noticed, maybe? Typical 30-year-olds. When the old man woke up, he read the message and rushed to the library. The American was just then coming out of the toilets, and he looked around. Luckily, the old man was practically invisible, an ordinary person, and above all, an old man. What's to be afraid of in an old man? The pale flesh, the weary gaze, the glasses with their light-colored frames, the sparse beard, the black overcoat, were banality personified. He had wandered cautiously among the tables that held the computers. The American was leaving. The old man waited until he was out of sight, until the American wouldn't be able to see the entrance to the toilets. The boy's head had been blown open. He was sitting, collapsed, on the bowl in the second stall. The old man left the bathroom calmly. With unhurried steps, he made for the inner glass door at the entrance, and stood on the threshold, looking out to Via Dante. He looked to the left to see if there was any sign of the American, then slowly to the right, which was exactly where the American was, looking at him. The old man immediately went left. Pausing for scarcely an instant on the steps, he felt the American's cold gaze on his back. He turned, took out his cell phone, and called the two agents assigned to him. They were leaning on the railing at the Corduzio metro station. The American would appear there. They were not to let him become suspicious. Follow him, yes, but barely. 1-2 minutes lead. Wait for him to meet someone. If he met someone, they were to follow that person and interrogate him, make him say where the American was. Anyway, it was preferable to lose the American, let him go, since by now the damage had been done. They had to hope that he hadn't changed apartments. To kill him on the street was unthinkable. He had to be shot in the head, and no one would ever get close enough to shoot him in the head. On the steps of the underpass between the Duomo and Via Torino, the American met a Pakistani, or an Indian, maybe a Sinhalese, big but soft. He handed the American a folder. He also spoke to him for a few seconds. Then the American headed to the subway station. The Pakistani, however, went back toward Via Torino. The two agents didn't want to pay attention to the old man's orders. They wanted to keep following the American, let the contact go.